You're now listening to the Engage the Rockies podcast, your go-to podcast for local and state issues concerning Colorado.
Hello, Rockies. This is Sarah Jane Maroney, your host, and today we are joined by Matt Solomon, a civic-minded entrepreneur with over 2 decades experience bridging the private and public sectors. He has successfully built and led private businesses while actively contributing to his community through roles on Eagle Town Council and various local and state and nonprofit boards and commissions. As the published author of Fortunate Accidents, Matt has demonstrated his ability to communicate complex ideas effectively. Currently, Matt serves as the project manager for Northwest Colorado Energy Initiative, NCEI, operating under the Associated Governments of Northwestern Colorado. NCEI is dedicated to fact-based public engagement on sustainable energy alternatives, including nuclear power, as Colorado transitions away from coal. We welcome him.
Thanks for having me, Sarah Jane.
So tell us, your bio says that you've done lots of things professionally and politically. Tell us a little bit.
For the last 20 to 30 years, I've worked both in the public and the private sector synchronistically. I've launched 2 companies internationally, 2 of my own locally in Colorado. At the same time, I worked as a paramedic, a deputy coroner. I've consulted with our U.S. military as an instructor and a contractor. And I served 2 terms on our local town council in Eagle, Colorado.
When was that?
That was from 2016 to, when was that? 2016 to 2021, I believe. 2015 to 2021. 5.5 years.
Okay. And I know a little backstory there, but maybe you could explain to the viewers, because you decided to run for a Senate seat. That bid was unsuccessful, but when you left town council, they were able to they were able to hold an election because of the timing. Is that right? Tell me a little bit more about that.
So while I was on council, we unfortunately had 2 people move out of town. So we had to appoint 2 seats while I was on council. And then the following year, we had 2 dear friends die in an avalanche. And so we had to appoint 2 more seats. So 4 out of 7 seats on our council at one period in time were appointed positions. And I didn't want to put that burden on the council again. It's a really hard position to be in because you're working on a council where the majority was not elected. So I worked with the mayor and with the town attorney and with the town manager so that I could step down from the council in a way that lined up with that election so that my seat could be elected and not appointed. The other thing I did was I stayed behind the scenes as a consultant to help with, not as a paid consultant, but as a volunteer to help with the transition for all the new council members after that election, and just to ensure that knowledge and information was passed on and to be of service to the community, even if I wasn't in that role.
Wow, wonderful. It is important. So as a result of not getting the Senate seat, you still are quite involved. I believe it's Senator Lundeen that appointed you to an energy committee, or what? Maybe I don't have that right.
So the Senate Minority Leader Lundeen, he appointed me to the Judicial Review Commission. So when you get your blue book and you have the recommendations and summaries of the judges, I'm on the commission for District 5 reviewing the judges here, which is an incredible honor. And I've learned a lot about the process of what goes into those blue books. Governor Polis appointed me to the Colorado Broadband Deployment Board, which has since sunset. And then Senator Rankin asked if I would be the project manager for the Northwest Colorado Energy Initiative, which is what I'm currently doing now full time.
Tell us a little bit more about that, because we're all finding our utility bills are skyrocketing.
And energy is a big topic nationwide right now as well. In 2022, when Senator Rankin started this initiative, the initial intent was to conduct a feasibility study for transitioning the coal power plant from coal to nuclear. And then the state passed House Bill 23-1247 to conduct its own feasibility study. And when that bill passed, it included solar, wind, carbon capture, and nuclear and geothermal and nuclear energy as all forms of energy that would be looked into for this feasibility study. The concern in the community was it would be a top-down approach and their voices wouldn't be heard. So we worked with grants from the Department of Energy and conducted community outreach, conducted surveys, and really got the community engaged so that we could help prepare the community for this feasibility study, which still hasn't taken place. So we're also working with the communities on economic development opportunities, trying to keep them engaged and finding how they can transition from a single resource economy, coal, into potentially a multifaceted economy that's much more resilient. So there's been a lot of preliminary work, a lot of preliminary discussions, and quite a bit of community engagement in preparation for this feasibility study.
We love community engagement and civics. Okay, so what is the solution, and how, if that feasibility study still hasn't been done, what are we doing?
We, the collective, we, the state, we, our community. Come on, Sarah Jane.
Okay, fair enough. I guess as a voter, as an informed person, I want solutions. Some of us are okay with coal, but that's obviously not going to go forward. And some people are very scared of nuclear, and that is also a factor, I'm sure. But what does the lay of the land look like going forwards?
Well, energy, like water, and like opinions across the board, the sky's the limit on the emotional reaction that can be elicited when discussing energy. I prefer to take politics and emotions out of the conversation, and one of the driving values of our work has been to be fact-based and data-driven. Let's have a ground-up, community-driven approach, but just like Joe Friday and Dragnet, just the facts, man. And that's the purpose of the surveys we conducted last year. We were told, this is how people feel, this is what you have to do. And I said, well, let's find out if that's correct. And what we found out was some of what we were told was true and some was not. You're right. Nuclear, for one example, elicits a lot of emotional response. So does solar and so does wind. And my hope is by having fact-based discussions, we can minimize the emotion in the conversation and have actual conversation where here's the facts, here's the truth. As far as the transition goes, Governor Polis and our legislature, they set a date without a plan. My hope was the feasibility study that was put into law 2 years ago would help us formulate a plan. I still have that hope. Since it hasn't been conducted yet, we're still taking steps to prepare for it. We have a technical grant with the National Renewable Energies Laboratory that is looking at what's the job workforce implications and what's the tax-based support from each form of energy cited in the feasibility study. That's a really good starting point when we talk about economic development, workforce and tax base. One of the pieces of data that we found in the first bit of this work was solar was set to provide a lot of local workforce opportunities. Problem is that data was old. It was based on the assumption there would be solar panels on the roof of every house and every business. And what we found in the last 12 months is our utility providers are, for the most part, purchasing solar from solar farms. So instead of solar providing 300 construction and electrical jobs locally, it's providing 5 or 6 jobs outside the region to maintain a solar farm. So now we're left, how do we support these coal miners and power plant workers that are looking down the pipe at this transition? So when this study is complete, we'll have more data to work with. At the same time, we are looking at what are the other opportunities. I know I've heard some of the utilities are going to go with natural gas, solar, wind, geothermal as a combined approach for the immediate transition. We still need to look long term. If we want to hit our clean air goals by 2030, 2040, and 2050, we need to start looking forward and not just How do we hit the megawatts of today? And how do we recruit quantum computing centers and data centers and all this advanced technology to the state? How are we going to meet those demands as well?
One of Engage the Rockies' principles is free markets. So I guess that is a good question for the legislature in terms of the laws that they're enacting don't seem to be inviting of companies to create here, although that's not what Governor Polis says. So I guess that's kind of my question as to how do you do that?
I think a good example of the transition of mindset in Colorado of late, if you look back at Senate Bill 181, where they changed a single word in the Colorado Oil and Gas Association. The mission statement of that used to be that we would foster the oil and gas industry in our state. After Senate Bill 181, the mission statement became we would regulate the oil and gas industry in our state. And that single word makes a lot of difference. And that mindset has played out in the health industry, it's played out in the energy industry, it's playing out in education. And these regulations, as we look at the budget this year, we're learning how costly they are. And there's a balance. Again, though, I don't feel politics belongs in the discussion of energy, just like I don't feel it belongs in the discussion of water. We need to look for solutions. We need to support our local communities. We need to support the safety and resilience of our grid.
Okay. So shifting gears slightly. Thank you.
Sorry, I got a little heavy there.
No, not at all. I mean, obviously, we focus mostly on El Paso, but Colorado and the Drake plant was closed here. So it does significantly impact us in this region as well. So, but shifting gears slightly, you managed to write a book, which I couldn't help, but since you sent me a copy of it, is it a fortunate accident that you are here in Colorado, that you are involved in civics, that you have held office in Colorado?
That's a good question. I think you'll have to read my book to find that answer. I would say it's a series of fortunate accidents that led from growing up to landing in Colorado for the last 30 years. And this role that I'm filling with the Northwest Colorado Energy Initiative, I'm able to pull from all of these past experiences in both the private and the public sector to really help work with our local county commissioners, our local town councils. Senator Roberts and I talk regularly and do the best we can to support the region and the district. And I'm grateful to be where I'm at. And I'm thankful to Senators Lundeen and Senator Rankin and all of our county commissioners for having faith in me and trusting the integrity of the work that we're trying to do.
So what would you say to someone, I mean, before you ran for Eagle Town Council, what would you encourage someone to do in terms of getting involved?
The first question I ask anybody, and the first question I asked myself before running for office for town council was, what's the true purpose and true role of the office I'm running for? You see people running for town council or county commissioner focused on national policies that aren't necessarily the purpose of that office. And I appreciate advocacy. I appreciate that we all have a role to play. The hard part is when you're in elected office, you're no longer an advocate for a single issue or a single part of the population. You now have a responsibility for the best interest of the district or the region that you're representing in that elected office. So I feel that some say, well, as an elected official, I'm an advocate for my region. And by the true definition of that term, yes, you are. You're also representing a voice for the best interest of the region. And so if you're a gun control advocate, that's great. Stay a gun control advocate. If you're an elected official, good intentions don't always make for proper outcomes. And the advocacy bit of having good intentions, the elected official also requires a responsibility of ensuring good outcomes. And if you can't balance the two, then that role might not be for you. And I did not mean for that to rhyme. I apologize. But there is a lot of responsibility for being an elected official. At the local town council level, a big focus is land use codes. It's not gun control laws. It's not illegal immigration. Right? That it's what are the land use issues? What's the zoning? What's the impact of HOAs? Do we have the budget balanced for our local police force or department? Do we have good support for our staff so that they have good morale to support the constituents in the town? And if you go in with a different mindset of advocating for bigger social issues in your $38 million state budget, local town budget. After enterprise funds are pulled out and after the bills are paid, you're left with $1.8 million or $2 million or maybe $5 million. Is that enough money to cover all of the social things that we all want to do to support the community? Or do we want to make sure our reserves are in place and then use that funding to stimulate the local economy, use it to possibly kickstart some good social efforts? We really have to balance that bottom line. And while we want to fund everything, we need to do so responsibly for the best interest of the entire community or the entire state.
So I'll go in a little bit of a direction here. You actually have some firsthand knowledge about what were the gun laws in Colorado. Why is that?
So I owned a gun shop in Colorado for 10 years, from 2008 to 2018. And I watched the full change from when, if you had a concealed carry permit, it would bypass the 4473 background check, to watching some sheriffs do door knocks in neighborhoods to get permission from your neighbors to get a concealed carry permit, to the beginning of the duplicitous laws in our state in 2010 that just replicated federal law with different language and a higher cost and more manpower requirements to the CBI. We've had a lot of additional gun laws in the last 15 years, and we've had a lot of additional crime in the last 15 years. Something's not working, and it would be great to find a solution that worked beyond good intention. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I covered a bill that we talked about in our week in review where it's about ammo and buying ammo. And one of our representatives got up and said, why are we sending business to Wyoming? That doesn't make any sense. And that in Wyoming, they're just next to the fireworks stand is going to be an ammo stand now, if that were to pass. I think the bill's headed to the Senate. But yeah, it does seem like there's some incongruency here.
And that ammo stand is right next to the magazine stand as well.
Yeah. So any final thoughts that you would want to tell us about in terms of energy, guns, social engagement, whatever? I'm interested because of your career that has spanned quite a lot of different offices, a lot of different aspects. And you're kind of the poster child for getting involved in terms of civics in your community. And you've done lots of those things. So any final thoughts?
I appreciate that, Sarah Jane. And I appreciate being on here and talking to all of you that are watching and listening. Stay engaged, stay involved, work with each other. We have two ears and one mouth for a reason. And we really do need to listen more than we talk. And if we listen, maybe whatever side of the coin we're on, we have the potential to learn something from the other side of the coin. Whether it's learning how to communicate with each other or learning how to turn a good intention into a good outcome. That's the first step. If you want to run for office, know the roles of that office, reach out, listen. One of the best things we learned when I was on town council was when people came in for public comment, we didn't dismiss them off to staff. We repeated back to them what they said so that we could truly understand what they said and they knew we understood them. And I think that's really important. We need to communicate for understanding. We really need to be good neighbors and friends, and we need to learn how to disagree so that we can find actual solutions. As far as energy goes, we are at the crux of a potential economic crisis in some of the communities in our state, and we need to be aware of that. And we need to agree on a common denominator of our goal. If that common denominator is clean air, then we need to find the source of the bad air, which, according to the reports I've read, are Denver and Boulder. And we need local initiatives there to address that. And if we want to transition, we are transitioning from coal. So keeping that goal of clean air in mind, let's find the best solution to meet that goal that supports our workforce and supports the future demand. That could be advanced nuclear energy. It could be a combination. An integrated energy system where advanced nuclear works with wind, solar, hydrogen, battery storage, geothermal, And now we've created a multifaceted system that really supports our economy and is built for growth. So we need to keep our minds open for that. But to do that, we've got to listen for understanding so that we can then communicate for best results.
And just one quick other question. Sorry, it came up as you were talking there. Where are we at with the laws that were passed in terms of what we're expecting? Like, we need to have clean air by 2030. What deadlines do we have in terms of, you said that the legislature had made decisions without a path, and that we're trying to figure out what that path is. What are those deadlines that are looming?
The deadlines currently aren't the ones set by the air emission regulations because they've been bumped up through the transition. So whether you're in Craig or Hayden or Pueblo, it's a range from 2028 to 2032. We've got this 4-year window that's coming up really quick where these power stations are going to start shutting down and where the coal mines are going to start shutting down. So we've got to move fast. We've got to recognize mental health is a big topic around the state in a variety of areas. I haven't heard mental health discussed in the energy sector, but I'd like to point out we have a lot of families that have been generational workers in our coal mines and in our power plants. And today is March of 2025. And in 2.5 very short years, they might have to find a new career path or figure out the next steps for their family. And that's a lot of stress to place on a family that has roots in a community and roots in a company and in a way of life and in a career. And we really do need to support these workers, their families, and their community.
Wow. Well, Matt, you've given us a lot to think about. I'm sure people can find your book on Amazon.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for your insights. Obviously, very much in a lot of different areas, but the energy stuff was super interesting. I learned a lot and I appreciate it.
Sarah Jane, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you for listening to the Engage the Rockies podcast, your go-to podcast for local and state issues concerning Colorado.